Hello, everyone. You're listening to Focused Faith Podcast with Carrie Powers. I have a guest with me, and I'm super excited about. I say that every single time I have a guest, Nicole. So I say I'm super excited, but it's true. It's all true because I am. And this is Nichole Brown, and she is joining us from Eugene, Oregon. Go Ducks, right, Nicole?
Go Ducks! Woo! Yeah.
All right, so hey, it's the basketball season. I know you're not. Are you watching?
Yeah, I'm not like a huge basketball watcher, but at this point you have to. I mean, both the men and the women's team are playing the Sweet 16 this weekend. So huge deal. So
yes,
I'm a football girl, as you know, but
yes. I do know that. Yeah.
I got to get down with a little bit of basketball when it gets to this point. So,
well, it's your team. So
yeah.
I know. Well, that's exciting. But yes, so Nicole is joining us from Eugene. Now, Nicole is not on to talk about sports. We are actually going to continue a conversation that I've had on the podcast in the previous weeks, where I have discussed the topic of the foster care system. And Nicole, I've had people on from different aspects. I've had a mom on that has adopted children from the foster care system, and she shared her story of what that looked like and the obstacles and just what a blessing it's been for her to have this expanded family. So that was a fun conversation. And then I've also had someone on from Montana, and he discussed what it was like to work for his agency, which really looks at equipping families to become foster parents. So the reason I asked you on tonight, Nicole, is because you can present a different angle that I haven't tackled with the foster care system. And Nicole has given her life in service to children and to the welfare of children. And Nicole, you worked for 12 years for the welfare agency in Oregon. Is that correct?
I did. I was a CPS worker for about 12 years. Yeah.
And that is like on the front lines where you were handling all of the, emergency calls?
Yeah. So CPS workers generally handle, the calls come in the front door and they're screened out for, legal criteria, basically, to see whether or not a caseworker needs to respond to those calls concerns of abuse or neglect. And then they would be assigned to workers like me. So basically my job was to assess and investigate calls of abuse or neglect, and then come up with safety plans, or, of course, there was removing children in that situation and that sort of a thing. And we can dive more into that later. But they spent about 12 years doing that. Yeah.
So it's a challenging and a difficult job, and really can be a thankless job, isn't it? Because you're walking into a situation where the parents aren't happy to see you, and a lot of times the children aren't as well. Even though you're there to help them, they don't see it in that way. So it can be really emotionally charged, I'm sure, to continue to do that kind of work.
Yeah, it's extremely stressful. My heart is really with child welfare, and I don't regret any of my time doing it. I think there were some really positive aspects. I really felt like I made some, positive impacts at times, and, got to know some really great people. But yeah, overall, it's extremely challenging. You're wearing a lot of different hats. There's a lot of liability involved. So not only are you dealing with, stressful, traumatic situations, and, but you're also dealing with the liability that comes with that if you make a wrong decision, and kind of having to live with that. I mean, I left the agency, I think 10, 11 years ago-ish. And I still have days where I think about the kids that, I didn't get to in time, that were hurt, that almost died, that, maybe I couldn't find them. In one case, one child did die. And, as much as I know that I did my best, you still carry that guilt. Like, what if I had done this? Or what if I had asked this question? Or, looked deeper into that person's history? Or, there's just different things that comes with, not to mention the day in and day out of seeing pretty sad stuff and difficult situations. So yeah, it's tough. And yeah, like you said, it's, there's not a lot of thank yous in that job. You're kind of hated on many levels. You're the way I kind of describe it is you're kind of always, I mean, it sounds dramatic, but you're kind of always failing. You're usually, your caseload is way too high to manage. I think most caseworkers would probably acknowledge that, kind of nationwide, I'm assuming. And so you constantly feel like you're behind and failing, but then also but you're doing your best, you're just constantly treading water, trying to, put out fires, help families, help kids, and make the right decision ultimately to keep them safe. So yeah, and that when you knock on somebody's door, they're not happy to see you, they're threatened. And so there's a huge, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Well, it is a lot. And it's extremely dangerous, really, what you're walking in. You don't know what you're walking into. Not even to think about the secondary trauma that you're also taking on as being a frontline worker and dealing with what you're just talking about, those continual thoughts of, did I do enough? Did I ask the right questions? Could I have done more? Something that you, like you said, you're going to carry with you. Obviously, because you care so much about what you're doing and about these children. And really, honestly, Nicole, you guys they're frontline workers. They're first responders, really. Do you feel that the support level is where it should be for those workers?
No, I mean, I think that was always, kind of my struggle is you're doing first responder things. And oftentimes we'd be working, well, most of the time side by side with law enforcement. And of course they are very well supported in that regard. They have, they go in pairs a lot. There's just a lot more support and acknowledgement about the things that they're dealing with. But when, as a CPS worker, there isn't that same level of respect, I feel like. I know that's really general, but I think generally speaking, that's the truth. And, and so we felt like, a lot of us felt like we were doing things that were, the same that the police were doing. Oftentimes I can remember them having me lead certain investigations and, go first and knock on the door first. And, all of those things, take the lead in interviewing a perpetrator or a child, obviously. But you're not sort of revered as that. You're not respected and you don't have the supports for that.
Right.
You couldn't, not that I really wanted to, but you're not carrying a weapon. You're not protected in those ways. You're not wearing protective gear, but yet you're dealing with the same population in the same circumstances a lot of times. And so
really honest and viewed in the same way. Yeah. Right. I mean, you're walking into a situation, you're being viewed the same way that a police officer is being viewed, but like you said, not having the protection. Right.
Yeah. And then also, I mean, just with that added, I mean, people associate CPS with, removal of children from the home. Now, granted, I would go months without removing children from the home. That wasn't the main bulk of my job. There was a lot of other work that you do to keep kids at home. And so that was the bulk of my job. But, there are times when you have to remove children. And so that's what people, the vision or, what's the word I'm looking for? But yeah, that's how people see CPS. Yeah. And so there's a level of like automatic distrust, automatic defensiveness, it's uncomfortable and can be dangerous all at the same time.
Sure.
So
I also think too, you're walking in and maybe you're making a determination, maybe you make a recommendation based on what you've seen with the family, but ultimately you don't make the final decision on even reunification.
Right. Well, yes and no. I mean, ultimately a judge is always, when it comes to removing children and returning them home, if it's complicated, but if the state has custody, then yeah, the judge makes that final determination. But you're making initial decisions that then are reviewed by the judge. So yeah, I mean, it's tough. You kind of have to stand your ground and, you do what is right to keep the kids safe. I didn't generally have a problem doing that just because I knew in my heart at the time, based on all the information I'd gathered, that this was the only step I could take. I would try everything but removing children. Obviously I would hope that every worker does that. But yeah, it's tough because you're always kind of second guessing. Every removal of a child, I would drive home and think, gosh, did I have to do that? was there something else I could do? And, and so there's a lot of that, that you carry with you, even if you've had the information you needed, but you still think, man, this was a big decision for this family, a big disruption in their life, attachment, did I have to make that decision? And yeah, you do carry that.
Well, and I think also, what's coming to my mind too is talking about what you started out with and said that, you're feeling like you're continually failing, I think is what you said. And what came to my mind, is what's been real popular, like on Netflix, and I can't watch it. I can't sit through it, but you probably know the show I'm referring to. It referenced a child that died in LA County.
Actually, don't.
You don't know. Okay. It was, I think it's the trials of Gabriel Hernandez, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And it was pretty controversial because they put the social workers on trial for not doing, they felt, right, enough. And wow, it was, like I said, I can't watch it. I personally haven't seen it because I can't watch that. But what a horrible situation from every angle. Because just like you said, and I cannot imagine what the caseload looks like in LA County. I cannot imagine, but I imagine that there are not enough people doing that job. I can promise you that.
Right.
So they're overloaded and expected to cover a enormous area too. LA County is huge, just geographically. And then population wise, we know it's huge. So I can imagine they're expected to do just this supernatural job, really. And then when something horrific happens, that's the reaction. And all I can think is all these people like yourself who, you did 12 years of trying to fight for the innocent children. It's just horrifying to me to think about people who've given their life for that and to deal with something along those lines. And along that line, you had to leave the agency because of a really horrific, and you don't have to give us a lot of details, but I know that case still weighs heavy on you personally.
Yeah, it was, in 2009, actually, December 9th, 2009, I just, ironically, I just had decided, it was my first night on call. I had decided to, to work a little overtime and take the on-call pager, basically is what it was at the time. And I got a call and, right before I was just settling in for the night. It was probably like 8:00 or so, and had put the kids to bed and settled in. And I got a call from the police department, from the sheriff's office, that there had been a child fatality. And I needed to respond. And so, after that was like a decade into my career. So that in and of itself wasn't too traumatic. I mean, it sounds horrible, but, I dealt with child fatalities and I just kind of assumed it was, an infant or, co-sleeping situation.
Right.
But what happened is, ended up being a 15-year-old that actually just maybe a mile from my house that had been tortured and murdered by her mom and stepdad and starved. And so, there's a lot of horrible details, but what ultimately happened is it was incredibly traumatic. There were two children that were not abused in the home. I mean, of course, witnessing these things was abusive, but in terms of physical abuse, they were healthy and safe in that regard. And so it was, a lot, and we didn't know what happened to the child or to the teenager. Her name was Jeanette. And, we didn't know at the time what happened. And so it was just, trying to push through that investigation with law enforcement and interviewing the kids and figuring out where they're going to go that late at night, just all the things that come with that were extremely traumatic. Just the details that started to come out and kind of having to live that day in and day out, gathering information from the children and other people took, it took a long time. And so it was repetitive trauma and hearing these really horrible details. And so, yeah, I think everyone involved in the case, and I think it's okay to talk about in the sense that it's extremely public at this point. But I think people, you can't help but be really affected. And so, yeah, it for me, what that looked like, it was towards the end of my career. It was really hard to process. And there were, and if I can just be candid, there were moments where I definitely felt like you're kind of going insane and you're like, it's a lot of trauma to process.
Yes.
And so, what that ultimately looked like, and again, I was not alone in that response. But it did ultimately, I think, not looking back, I think even at the time I knew it really affected my just ability to continue to do that work. I was, not on my game. I was making mistakes. I was, couldn't keep up. It was just a lot. And at the time, and I think even now, I think the agency really, child welfare as a system really struggles with support around secondary trauma. I think there's such good people that work there, and they just kind of grind. They do their job. But when it comes to like taking care of yourself and the self-care piece and the support piece, that's an area that really lacks. And I think for me at the time, and my coworker that responded to the case, we were fortunate that the sheriff's office did have a really good setup in terms of supporting officers and the deputies in their system. And so we were able to really, they brought us in kind of under their wing and supported us. But yeah, and my experience is not, there's many caseworkers that have gone through that, or, maybe more extreme or a little less, but it's all very traumatic. And so what is really near and dear to my heart is really making sure that the system changes in that regard. I've, at the time I made some efforts in that regard and worked with our state offices, at a higher level to implement some programs to help with that, to help support workers. It was called the Trauma Response Protocol. I don't know that it still exists, but I continue to be really passionate about that because it's so critical.
It is absolutely critical. And it blows me away really when you think about it in terms of, we know that the system needs to be changed. We know that, but I think to really look at it and to really understand it, we have to look at it from all angles, of what it really does need to be overhauled. And for sure, there has to be this high level of support implemented for people who are, like you said, continuing to having to go into those situations and are being traumatized over and over and over again. I don't want to do the job, but I absolutely respect anybody who does, because it's a necessary job. We need someone who's willing to do that. So I think when I saw that and I see those things in the news where there's any kind of pushback, and that pushback happens to workers, that makes me angry, because my first reaction is, for people who have something negative to say, my first reaction is, are you being part of the solution? Because if you're not part of the solution, then you really don't have any reason to be opening your mouth.
Right.
Unless you're willing to do something, then you really have to be careful what you say, because you're not the one going into these homes and having to put yourself in that kind of situation over and over and over again. And no, ultimately, we all want these children to be okay. That's what everybody wants. And I guess, Nicole, really, for people who are listening to this, and what could be something that just average people could do to maybe be a support? Is there a way, do you think, that just like the average general population can be more aware of how they can be supportive?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? I think, I think communities and states are starting to really see the need to support foster families, which is incredibly important. I think that, I could go on and on with ideas on how to support foster families, and but what I think also, what gets left is caseworker or child welfare staff that kind of that's what gets left out. And I think that's probably across the board. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, I guess the only thing is, you know, changing the narrative or helping change that perception.
Yes.
And I don't know how the average person, you know, the normal people, you know what I mean? But how normal people, no, how just, you know, everyday individuals can help do that. Other than if you know someone in the system, maybe finding ways to support them, even just saying, like, even sending cards. I mean, I think I had like a few, like at my desk over the course of 10 years, I probably had like 4 letters from families or something where and they were like gold, you know, you put them on to keep you going. You would put it on your little wall, like that. Thank you got us through, you know? So, yeah, I think it's a challenge, but maybe looking at, I mean, one idea might be there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of communities that have, agencies like nonprofits now in place that are like, I think probably, the person that you had on, the man that you were describing. Yeah. That's heading up the, you know, the network to support families, but those would be good agencies to reach out and say, that's great. But do you have contacts for the workers? Do you have contacts for not just CPS workers, but, you know, there's other caseworkers in child welfare as a whole that are doing traumatic, difficult work every day too. And so I think just maybe finding those agencies and partnering with them somehow with churches. You know, I know our church here locally does a lot of work with that particular agency. It's called Every Child here in Lane County. That's doing a ton of work actually statewide for foster families, but they also do work to support caseworkers. And so, you know, whether it be monetary support, you know, making goodies, delivering like anything to say thank you, I think little things go a long way.
Totally.
So I don't know if that's helpful, but
no, it's helpful. I think it's, you know, why I think these conversations are important and why I like to try to have that component is because I like to leave people with something. Do you know what I mean? Like we're talking about like a heavy topic, and it can kind of be overwhelming. And I just want people to realize that even just those small things we're talking about can be very important to the individual person that's doing the job. So to never minimize that, you know, I think you're exactly right. Those are great suggestions. And I think that even just finding your local, you know, agency, your local Child Protective Service agency or Department of Family Services or whatever it's called in your area. And, you know, sending a bouquet of flowers, you know, for people that work on that floor. I mean, just anything to show that there are people in the community that value what they're doing. And because I mean,
no, that's exactly right. I mean, I think that just the little bit of thanks goes so far, or just even understanding and validating like, man, you have a tough job. Thank you for doing that. Or, you know, that, I mean, because it doesn't happen much, that goes a really long way. You know, it goes a long way to make you feel like you're not always the bad guy. Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think that that's the thing is that we're all really, hopefully we're all, you know, on the same team and we're all working for the same thing, you know, which is the welfare and the safety of children. And that's the goal. And I think it's super important to be just aware of ways you can support agencies that are working to be preventative. I know there's a lot of great agencies. I work for a nonprofit here in Northern California, and I'm a supervisor for a home visiting program. And that's what we do. We send women, because they're all just women, but we send our caseworkers are women, and we send them into the home to be a support to mom and baby right away. In order to prevent child abuse and neglect by being in that home, by giving her a different option, by showing her different ways. Because that's the thing. It continues. It's a cycle because a lot of times they just don't know any different or it's been done to them. So just coming in with some compassion and understanding. So I know you're kind of working on that end of it now after your 12 years with the welfare system. So you can kind of speak just generally on what you're doing in that angle now.
Yeah. So after I left the agency, I spent about 10 years working for the attorneys here that represent children in foster care. And I was a home visitor essentially, and legal assistant, and worked making sure that the children in foster care and or that were wards of the court had adequate, representation, and making sure they were safe as well, and knew about their rights and things like that. And then within the past year, I transferred to working at the Oregon Social Learning Center, and helping them implement some of their programs into the community. And so in their preventative, the particular projects I work on are preventative. And so it's really looking at, we know we can treat a certain treat the population with, substance abuse issues and, parenting struggles and things like that. But this particular program looks at how do we prevent things from escalating to the point where they need that sort of invasive or, extensive treatment. So, but it's the particular project that I work on is a research study. And so what they're really trying to see is, is looking at the barriers to prevention essentially. And because the system is really just in all facets set up to be reactionary and to respond to crisis, and there isn't a lot of prevention or support around prevention and funding for prevention. And I think that's true across the board. So that's where I'm at now. It's a different thing. I'm not working directly with kids and families, but trying to be involved in programs that ultimately do a huge bit of good for the families and kids.
Absolutely. So, and yes, a totally different change for you. And I'm sure that's a bit of an adjustment, not being in direct service and actually having your hands in the mix, so to speak. Right. Yeah. But what an important work on this angle that you're doing. And you have to share, we skipped over the fact that you also have this other amazing job that you do full time, which is you're a mom.
I am
and you're a wife. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah. I mean, just in a nutshell, I've been married to my husband, Keith, for 20 years. And we have an 18-year-old, almost 19, that's at OSU, Oregon State, studying engineering. We're very proud of him.
Wait, hold on. How is it now that because you're a huge duck fan, and now you have a beaver in the house?
It's kind of a big problem.
How do you get over this? How do you handle Civil War and all of that? Like, what does that look like?
Well, because of COVID, it's been a little bit off, it's been different. But what is a problem is that when what I didn't share is that I also have a toddler. I have a 1.5-year-old. So our kids are 18, 15, and 1.5. So,
oh goodness,
surprise baby. But we finally got our girl, and so anyway, I'm ecstatic. But
she's amazing, and she's fantastic, and keeps you on your toes.
Cute and fun, yes. But she was born during, has grown up during COVID, so she thinks everyone on Zoom wants to talk to her. Which makes it really difficult for my job. But she knows everyone responds, and then, hi.
So cute.
Super cute. But that's going to be different when COVID ends. But, so what is a problem with Civil War in our House divided situation is that, well, for those that don't know, I mean, Oregon, I'm a huge Oregon Duck fan, and the main rival is the Oregon State Beavers, which is where Joe's attending. But the only problem so far that we've had is that he bought her beaver pajamas. And so whenever he comes down to hang out and visit and he changes her, he puts the stupid beaver pajamas on, and they're bright orange, and I hate them.
Yes. I will survive. That would be a problem for you, Nicole. Yeah.
It's a huge problem. Yep.
Huge problem.
Yep. But I knew it was coming. I just focus on the prize. He's really studying it. He's studying engineering. He has to go there. And then I have to deal with these stupid jammies for a year. Yeah. Anyway.
I mean, they could just accidentally get lost.
Yeah. I'm like
everything else in my house.
Yet. And she's so tiny, she doesn't grow very much, and so they just still fit just keep spitting. So anyway.
She's cute. She's real cute. Well, all your kids are cute. Like you have just this amazing family. So, and 20 years of marriage. I mean, that survived.
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast. I'd be happy. How much time do you have? Because
oh man. No, God is good, right?
God is good. Yes. Yeah. Only because of God we have made it this far. Yeah.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're out of time, but I really appreciate you diving into this. It's a difficult conversation, and I think it's an important conversation. I think it's a conversation we need to continue to keep having so that everyone is aware of all the different aspects that go into this complicated situation that we find ourselves in, and that we're going to continue to find ourselves in. So preventative is a huge bonus, and we need to be aware of that when we're making those kind of voting decisions, that money needs to go into prevention. But I just think it's like we said, it's very important that people are aware that they can make a difference as well. It doesn't take, they don't have to be a foster parent necessarily, even though that's great, but they can make a difference just simply by supporting those who are doing that, or supporting those who have given their life to the welfare of children. So again, thank you, Nicole. And we wish your Ducks good luck.
Thank you.
This weekend.
They may need it. It's going to be a tough road moving ahead. So
Right. Well, they've done well, haven't they?
I think it's fine. But I'm more worried about my football team. So we'll see. Yeah.
Okay. We'll see, huh? All right. Well, listen, I appreciate everybody tuning in and watching the podcast or listening to it. Follow me on social media. Focused Faith Facebook is probably the best way. I try to stay connected on that. I'm trying to learn Instagram, Nicole. It's a thing. It's a real thing. I don't know why. I have trouble.
No, I can't figure it out. I'm like, do I put this on a story? Do I put it in the
I don't understand that either. And then it's like, how do I tag? Like somebody tagged me and I was like, well, how do I do that? I feel super old. I understand that I'm aging myself completely by admitting this, but that should be a whole nother podcast, is all of us who are trying to figure out Instagram.
Don't get me started on TikTok or Snapchat. I don't even know.
I don't understand that. I think that there's a level of like, my kids love it, and they'll walk up and be like, watch this TikTok, and they think it's hysterical. And all the time, most of the time, I don't get it. So I don't know I don't know what happens. But
stop trying, honestly. I guess I'm just what is it? What do we get called? Do we get called boomers? That's what Eli calls me. I don't know if I'm a boomer, but
we're not a boomer. Like that's like
I'm not a boomer.
But I think they say that as like an insult.
Yeah, like you're a boomer. You don't get TikTok. Yeah, I get.
A TikTok, it's just, I don't know. Some of that stuff doesn't make sense, but whatever.
No.
Anyway, I digress.
On Facebook.
Right. I am figuring Facebook out, kind of. So follow me, and I'll do my best to keep everybody up to date on what's going on. But again, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for being here, Nicole.
Yeah.
And so God bless everybody. I will tune in next week.